Gabriella walked into the upscale fashion boutique with a heavy heart and a tired smile on her face. She had been working there for months, but every day was a struggle. Her manager, Gloria, treated her more like a servant than a sales associate. Every time Gabriella made a sale, Gloria found a way to take it for herself. As a result, the girl almost always ended up with nothing. Instead of selling, she was sent out on errands, picking up dry cleaning, fetching coffee, cleaning out the warehouse. Meanwhile, other employees were busy serving wealthy clients. "You should be grateful," Gloria would say mockingly. "You don't belong here anyway." The senior employees were no better. They stole her clients, laughed at her modest clothes, and assigned her the most unpleasant tasks. But Gabriella never complained. One afternoon, while she was carefully folding expensive dresses, the glass door of the boutique swung open. An elderly man in shabby clothes walked in. His shoes were worn to the point of holes, and his hair was disheveled. The other employees wrinkled their noses in disdain. "Sir, you can't be here," one of them sneered. "This is a luxury boutique." The old man smiled, revealing yellowed teeth. "I just wanted to look around," he said quietly. Gloria, her heels clicking on the polished floor, walked slowly up to him and, looking him up and down, snorted contemptuously. "We don't serve the likes of you. This is a boutique for wealthy clients, not for beggars." The other employees laughed. Gabriella felt a pang in her heart. She knew what it was like to be looked down upon. Without thinking, she quickly walked up to the old man and gently touched his hand. "Sir, would you like some water?" she asked with genuine warmth. The old man's eyes lit up. "That would be very nice," he smiled. Ignoring the looks and whispers of her colleagues, Gabriella brought him a cold glass of water. She helped him sit down and smiled warmly. "Take your time, sir," she said softly. "Let me know if you need help." The old man touched her hand gently. His skin was rough and wrinkled. He looked at her as if he hadn't met a kind person in a long time. "Good things happen to good people," he whispered. Gabriella didn't know why, but his words touched her heart. Mr. Henson finished his water and smiled at her, his wrinkled hands resting on the table. "You're a kind girl," he said warmly. "Help me choose 10 gorgeous outfits." Gabriella blinked in surprise. 10? He nodded. "I want the best. High-quality suits, silk shirts, designer shoes." Her heart began to beat faster. This could be her biggest sale yet. Maybe Gloria would finally notice her efforts. Maybe this would be her lucky day. Gabriella quickly set to work, carefully selecting elegant suits, choosing accessories and the perfect ties. She even found the shoes that perfectly completed Mr. Genson's new look. The rest of the staff stood to the side, whispering. "This girl is just stupid," one chuckled. "He's clearly broke," another laughed. Gloria, arms crossed over her chest, watched with a mocking smile. "We'll see what happens," she muttered. Almost an hour later, Gabriella laid out the selected outfits in front of Mr. Genson. "Sir, I think these will suit you perfectly," she said happily. Mr. Genson smiled and clapped his hands. "I'll take them all," Mr. Henson exclaimed. Gabriella beamed. "They'll be worth $225,000, sir," she said, barely containing her excitement. The room froze. The other employees looked at each other, eyebrows raised in disbelief. Susan smirked. Mr. Henson patted his pockets, then chuckled softly. "Oh my God," he sighed. "I don't have any money." Gabriella's smile froze. The next second, the boutique erupted in laughter. "Are you kidding?" one of the senior employees shouted. "You spent all this time on an old beggar?" His eyes sparkled. She slowly approached Gabriella with a cheerful smile. The air was filled with the expensive scent of her perfume. "You really are stupid, aren't you?" Gloria smirked. "Did you really think that this old man could afford such clothes?" Gabriella turned to Mr. Genson. "Sir, do you have any money?" Mr. Genson sighed heavily. "I do, but it's related to my grandson. He's very rich. I just need to find him." Susan burst out laughing. "His grandson, of course. How convenient," she said sarcastically and turned to the other employees. "Ladies, do you hear that? This homeless old man is looking for his rich grandson." The boutique filled with laughter. The employees' voices sounded mockingly like the hum of bells. Gabriella felt her face flush with embarrassment, but she did not look away from Mr. Genson's sad eyes. Instead of arguing or shouting, she smiled softly. "It's all right, sir," she said quietly, placing the money in his shaking hands. "At least take this for the taxi home." Mr. Genson looked at her in surprise, his fingers trembling slightly. "You are a rare soul," he whispered. Gloria grinned and took a step forward. Her voice was sharp and cold. "I warned you, Gabriella," she said, narrowing her eyes. "I told you I would not tolerate filth in this boutique, but you didn't listen." She shook her head in mock disappointment. "The Lux Group maintains a high class. This store is part of the most exclusive fashion empire. We can't lower our standards by associating with street people." Gloria gave Gabriella a disdainful look. "You're ruining our image, and for that you're fired. Get out of my store." Gabriella took a deep breath, brushed away a traitorous tear, picked up her bag, and without a word, turned and walked out. She didn't know why, but something inside her told her that things would change. Mr. Henson watched her leave with a small, understanding smile. When the boutique door closed, he turned to Gloria. "You shouldn't judge people by their appearance," he said quietly. "Kindness is worth more than any clothes." Gloria rolled her eyes. "Oh, please spare me the moralizing, old man." She crossed her arms and smirked smugly. "Do you even realize where you are? Lux Group is a fashion empire worth billions. This boutique is for the elite. There is no place for the likes of you." Mr. Genson shook his head. "Wealth is not money, young lady. It is heart." Gloria's face flushed with anger. "That's it. I've had enough. Security!" Two strong men immediately rushed to the old man. "Take him out," Gloria ordered coldly. "I don't need a lecture here." The guards grabbed Mr. Genson by the arms, but he only smirked. "There is no need to use force," he answered calmly. "I'm leaving." With one last glance at Gloria, he walked out into the sunlit street. Gloria grinned contentedly, and the staff burst into laughter again. But she had no idea that she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Mr. Genson stopped a taxi and got in, giving the driver his address. As the car moved along the busy city streets, he looked out the window, lost in thought. Today he had witnessed true kindness and real cruelty. When the taxi stopped in front of a huge mansion, the driver's eyes widened in surprise. "Sir, is this your home?" he stammered. Mr. Genson just smiled, paid, and got out. Passing through the golden gates, he found himself inside his luxurious residence. Marble floors, golden chandeliers, walls decorated with famous paintings, everything breathed wealth. In the center of the spacious living room stood Leo Genson, the influential CEO of Lux Group. Handsome, with a piercing gaze, dressed in an expensive suit, he looked like a real billionaire. "Grandpa," a deep voice rang out, "where have you been? You were gone for several hours." Mr. Genson smiled. "I was checking out the world, my boy, and I met a truly kind soul." Leo frowned. "Checking out the world?" Genson sighed and began his story. He described how he entered the boutique, how the staff treated him with disdain, and how one girl, Gabriella, showed kindness. As he finished his story, Leo's expression turned cold. "They did that to you?" His jaw tightened. "They kicked you out of our store?" The old man nodded. Leo clenched his fists. "The boutique belongs to the Lux Group. They work for me. How dare they do that to my grandfather?" Mr. Genson calmly placed his hand on his clenched fist. "But that girl, she was different, she was kind, and she needs to be rewarded." Leo turned to his assistant, an elegant man named Richie. "Get me the boutique's security footage," he ordered. A few minutes later, Leo was sitting in his private office, watching the big screen closely. He saw everything. How Gabriella, ignoring the rudeness of her colleagues, continued to treat Mr. Genson with respect. How she took out her own money and handed it to him. Leo leaned back in his chair, his face serious. "Find her," he finally said, turning to Richie. The assistant hesitated. "Sir." "Find this woman. I want to know everything about her," Leo repeated in a firm voice, "and I want to see her." Richie nodded briefly and hurried out. Leo was left alone in his office, his gaze once again focused on the screen. A kind, innocent girl. Who was she? Gabriella walked slowly down the street. Every movement sent pain through her legs and a tightness in her chest. Without a job, without hope, without the slightest idea where she would get her next meal. Her last money had gone to Mr. Henson, and now she had nothing left. The midday sun was mercilessly burning her skin, but she only clutched her bag tighter, took a deep breath, trying not to cry. And suddenly, a luxurious black car smoothly stopped next to her. Gabriella froze. The car was polished to perfection and looked more expensive than anything Gabriella had ever seen up close. Then the tinted window rolled down and a man in a suit leaned out. "Miss Gabriella." His voice was professional and confident. The girl's heart began to beat faster. The man smiled politely. "My name is Richie. I am the personal assistant of Mr. Leo Genson, the CEO of Lux Group." Gabriella froze, holding her breath. "Lux Group," Richie continued. "My employer would like to meet with you. Please come with me." She looked at him in complete shock. This must be some kind of scam. Why would the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company want to meet with her? I think you're mistaken," she muttered, stepping back. Richie shook his head. "No, miss. Mr. Genson sent me personally to take you to his estate. You are completely safe." Gabriella's mind raced. This was crazy. It didn't make any sense. And yet, somewhere inside, something told her to agree. She swallowed, then took a deep breath and nodded slowly. "Okay." Richie opened the door for her, and she climbed in. The leather on the seats was the softest she had ever felt. The car pulled away smoothly, and Gabriella, clutching her bag nervously, stared out the window. This was the riskiest thing she had ever done. When they passed the massive golden gates, her eyes widened in amazement. A huge mansion, as if it had come straight out of an expensive movie, lay before her. A long driveway led to a stately estate decorated with marble columns and sparkling chandeliers. As soon as the car stopped, several uniformed employees hurried to open the door for her. Gabriella stepped out, feeling as if she had entered another world. "Please, come in," Richie said, leading her to the entrance. Everything was immaculate, luxurious, perfect. And then she saw him. Standing at the top of the marble staircase was Leo Genson. Until that moment, she had only known him from business articles and magazine photos. But in person, he looked even more elegant, even more commanding, even more irresistibly attractive than she could have imagined. And now he was looking right at her. Did you know this name? Leo Genson, the youngest billionaire, the most successful CEO, the man every woman dreamed of marrying. Gabriella suddenly remembered Gloria's words at work. "If I ever meet Leonard Genson," Gloria had once said, "I'll make sure he falls in love with me. He's the perfect man, rich, powerful, and handsome." And now he was standing right in front of her. Gabriella felt as if she were in a dream. Leonard's gaze was sharp, but his lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Miss Gabriella," he said smoothly, "I'm Leo Genson." Gabriella forced herself to inhale. She began, smiling nervously. Leo's smile widened slightly, as if he found her reaction amusing. And then, "Oh, there she is!" Gabriella turned around, her eyes flashing with surprise. Mr. Genson, an older man, stood at the foot of the stairs, his face aglow with happiness. "Gabriella, my dear," he said warmly, "thank you for coming." She smiled with relief. "You live here?" The old man chuckled deeply. "Oh yes, my dear, I'm not as poor as I might seem." Gabriella felt her knees buckle. She had accidentally helped the grandfather of a rich and influential family. She suddenly felt tiny in this grand mansion. Mr. Genson turned to Leo and said firmly, "This is the woman you should marry." Gabriella gasped and waved her hands, laughing shyly. "Oh no, it's not." But when she looked at Leo, she froze. He didn't laugh, didn't smirk. He just looked at her with a long, silent gaze, and for some reason it made her heart beat faster. Gabriella sat in the luxurious living room of the Genson mansion, feeling out of place. The soft light of the chandelier, the expensive velvet sofa, the quiet hum of the servants. Everything seemed unreal. Across from her sat Leo Genson, his face usually impassive. "I ran a background check on you," he said calmly. Gabriella's heart sank. "What?" Leo leaned back in his chair. "I was curious to know more about the girl who gave my grandfather her last money." Gabriella swallowed, feeling the tension in her chest. "What did you learn?" Her voice was cautious. Leo looked at her a little softer than usual. "You live alone. You have no family, no one to support you." There was no mockery or pity in his words, just fact. Gabriella looked down, clutching the fabric of her dress tighter. He was right. She had long been used to coping on her own, but hearing it from another person was painful. Leo sighed and motioned to his assistant, Richie. A few moments later, servants brought several large boxes into the room, elegantly tied with gold ribbons. Gabriella's eyes widened. What is this?" "A gift," Leo answered simply, "as thanks for helping my grandfather." One of the servants opened a box, revealing exquisite designer clothes, light silk dresses, perfectly tailored shoes, made to order. Another opened a second box, revealing a luxurious handbag worth more than her annual salary. Finally, Richie stepped forward, holding a small black box. Gabriella held her breath as he opened it. Inside was a set of keys. "A Rolls-Royce," Leo explained. "It's yours." Gabriella froze, looking at him incredulously. No, I can't accept that." Leo raised an eyebrow. "Why?" She shook her head firmly. "I didn't help Mr. Henson for the reward. It was the right thing to do." Leo looked at her as if he were trying to solve a riddle. "You're giving up the Rolls-Royce?" "Yes." There was a long silence. And then, to her surprise, Leo smiled, genuinely, warmly. "You're not like everyone else," he murmured. Mr. Henson, who had been watching silently all this time, suddenly clapped his hands. "If you won't accept gifts," he said warmly, "then at least stay with us for a while." Gabriella looked up. "Stay?" "Yes," the old man nodded. "I enjoy your company. I want you to live in the mansion for a while." Gabriella hesitated. The thought of living in such luxury seemed overwhelming. But there was so much kindness in the old man's eyes that in the end she couldn't say no. A few days after moving into the mansion, Gabriella was just beginning to adjust to her new life when a problem arose. A luxurious red convertible pulled up to the gate. Its engine roared before dying away. A woman in high designer heels stepped out, her lips pursed in annoyance. "Lucy!" Gabriella didn't know her, but when their eyes met, she knew trouble was coming. Lucy burst into the mansion, the sound of her heels echoing across the marble floor. "Leo!" she called, filling her voice with false sweetness. Leonard appeared in the doorway, casually adjusting the cuff of his expensive suit. His face remained impassive. Lucy glanced at Gabriella, and her expression immediately twisted with disdain. "Who is that?" she asked with a venomous grin. But before Gabriella could answer, Mr. Henson smiled. "This is Gabriella, my dear guest." Lucy laughed coldly. "A guest? In this mansion? Are you serious, Leo? Is she really a servant or a gold digger?" Gabriella clenched her fists, but before she could protest, Leo spoke first. "She is not who you think she is." His voice was hard. "She is our guest, and you will show her respect." Lucy froze, not hiding her shock, and Gabriella looked at Leo in surprise. But Lucy quickly pulled herself together, tossed her hair back, and smirked venomously. "Respect? Leo, wake up. She is poor. She does not belong here." Leonard's jaw tightened, and yet here she is. Lucy crossed her arms, smiling tightly. "Let me guess. She feigns innocence, but she wants your money. Gabriella couldn't help herself. I'm not here for anyone's money. Lucy rolled her eyes. Oh, please, I've seen your kind. Quiet, unassuming, until a rich man notices. And then, sudden love. Gabriella's face flushed, but before she could protest, Leonard took a step forward. Now his expression was truly dangerous. Enough, Lucy. She blinked. What? I said enough. His voice was cold and unyielding. Gabriella is a guest. You will not insult her again. Lucy's mouth opened but then closed, completely stunned. She had expected Leo to side with her. She had expected him to chase this girl away, but instead he had protected her. And now Lucy knew one thing. This girl was a threat. Lucy had always known that Leo didn't love her, but she didn't care as long as he provided her with a luxurious life. Designer bags, first-class travel, expensive jewelry, that's what really mattered. But now there was some simpleton who was ruining all her plans. Lucy wasn't going to sit back and watch her perfect world fall apart. No, she would find a way to get rid of Gabriella. With these thoughts, she angrily ran out of the house. Meanwhile, in the quiet of his private office, Mr. Henson sat comfortably in his massive chair, slowly sipping his tea. Leo stood opposite him, his arms crossed over his chest. "Grandpa, why did you call me?" he asked. Mr. Henson put his cup down and looked his grandson in the eyes. "This girl, Lucy," he said firmly, "she's not for you." Leo sighed heavily. "You already said that." "I'll say it again," Mr. Henson interrupted. "If you marry a woman like her, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Leo ran his hand over his face, trying to contain his irritation. "I'm not going to marry Lucy or anyone else for that matter." Mr. Henson nodded, pleased with what he'd heard. "A woman like that only loves money, and the day something goes wrong, she'll just leave you." Leo said nothing, but his head was filled with thoughts of Gabriella. The next morning, Gabriella found Mr. Genson and Leo at the breakfast lounge. She quietly cleared her throat. Grandpa Genson, Mr. Leo, I need to tell you something." Both men turned their attention to her. "I have to get a job," she said hesitantly. "I've been here for a few days now. I can't just stay for free. I need to earn my own money." Leo raised an eyebrow. "A job?" Gabriella nodded. "Yes. I don't want to take advantage of your kindness. It's important for me to be independent." Leo leaned back in his chair, thinking. "You know, I'm just looking for a secretary," he said casually. Gabriella's eyes widened. "What?" Leo crossed his arms. "You're looking for a job, and I'm looking for a secretary. It seems like a perfect match." Gabriella gasped. "A job at Lux Group headquarters?" Leo nodded. "Yeah, the position's been open for a few weeks now. I need someone hard-working and trustworthy." He paused for a moment, then added, "You fit that description." Gabriella stared at Leo, stunned by his words. This job was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It would bring her more money than she'd ever made. With her first paycheck, she'd finally be more independent and be able to move back into her own apartment. But working at Lux Group headquarters as Leo's secretary, it seemed too... "I don't know," Gabriella muttered. Mr. Henson, who had been listening to the conversation silently until now, suddenly grinned. "Darling," he said softly, "you should take this chance." Gabriella bit her lip, torn between doubts and the desire to agree. "No buts," Mr. Henson added firmly. "You deserve something good in life. You helped me without even knowing who I was. Now let us help you." Leo watched her carefully. Mr. Genson's eyes sparkled with joy. He had a secret plan. This job would bring Gabriella and Leo closer together and perhaps change their lives forever. The next morning, Gabriella walked into the Grand Lux Group headquarters. She was dressed in a simple but elegant outfit, clutching her bag tightly in her hands, feeling a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The lobby was huge, with marble floors and glass walls. Employees in expensive suits walked past quickly, carrying files and discussing something in a sharp, business-like tone. Gabriella had never worked in a place like this before. As she approached the reception desk, she met the gaze of a woman in a tight black dress. The woman looked her up and down and said coldly, "You must be Gabriella." "Yes," she answered politely. The woman's lips curled slightly into a smile. "So you got the secretary job?" Gabriella nodded slowly. At that moment, another employee, a woman in a bright red suit, whispered loudly to her colleague, "I heard she slept with the HR manager to get this job." Gabriella's heart sank. The other woman chuckled, "Or maybe she's someone's secret lover." Whispers and suppressed laughter filled the space. Gabriella felt her cheeks flush with anger and humiliation. She wanted to scream, to prove that it was a lie. But instead she raised her head and said nothing. Let them talk. She came here to work, and she would prove them wrong. Lucy watched from the other side of the counter. Lucy was seething with rage. It was bad enough that Gabriella was living in the Genson mansion. But now she had joined the Lux Group. And not just any position, but worked directly under Leo. Lucy had spent years trying to tie herself to Leo, carefully protecting him from other women. She had created the illusion that she was his future wife, the only one who was truly right for him. And then Gabriella came along, stormed into the office, her heels clicking loudly on the marble floor. Her face was flushed with anger. She had no time to waste. Gabriella had to disappear. As a senior manager, Lucy had power, and she knew how to use it. By the end of the day, rumors had spread throughout the office. Now everyone was whispering that Gabriella was only after Leo for his money, that she had seduced him for the sake of her career, that she was a fortune hunter. Gabriella had heard gossip behind her back before, but now, when she walked into the break room, she was met with open insults. As soon as she appeared, the conversations died down, and then there was mocking laughter. "Look who's here," one employee smirked. "What's it like to build a career by sleeping with the boss?" another asked. "Maybe I should try to get close to the CEO." "Who knew it would be that simple?" the third chuckled. Gabriella felt her heart clench. She wanted to scream to explain that it was a lie, but she knew it wouldn't change anything. They had already passed their sentence. By lunchtime, the rumors had reached Leo, and when he found out who had spread them, his patience snapped. At the general meeting that same day, Leo Genson walked into the room, and the room immediately fell silent. Lucy sat at the head of the table, certain that he had finally realized that Gabriella was the problem. But instead, his piercing gaze was directed straight at her. "Lucy," Leo said coldly. She pushed her hair back, plastering on a sweet smile. "Yes, dear?" Leo's jaw clenched. "Gabriella saved my grandfather's life without asking for anything in return." His voice was loud and clear. "She's more human than you'll ever be." The room fell into a deathly silence. Lucy's smile vanished in an instant. Gabriella's heart skipped a beat. But Leo wasn't finished. He turned to the others. "If I hear one more word about Gabriella in that tone," he paused, looking around at the staff, "it's not just gossip." She had never seen anyone stick up for her like that before. Looking at Leo, Gabriella felt something soften in her eyes. Maybe he wasn't as cold as she thought. Meanwhile, Lucy stormed into Leo's office, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. "How dare you humiliate me like that?" she screamed. Leo barely looked up from his desk. "You should watch your tone, Lucy." "Watch mine?" she snorted. "Leo, people always saw me as your future wife. Do you realize what you just did to my image?" He finally looked at her, and his gaze was icy. "You should have thought of that before you started a campaign of lies against a man who has done nothing to you." His voice was sharp and uncompromising. Lucy's lips were trembling. "You prefer her to me?" Leo sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "Lucy, you know there was never anything between us." She froze. "We were never dating," he continued. "I never asked you to be my girlfriend. I never gave you any reason to think we were more than acquaintances." Lucy recoiled as if she had been struck. "So stop being possessive, Lucy," Leo said firmly. "I was never yours." Her hands began to tremble. She had spent years in his shadow, creating the illusion of a relationship that never existed. She believed that if Leo hadn't denied the rumors, then someday they would be true. But now, with a few words, he had ruined everything. Without another word, she turned and ran out of the office, her face flushed with anger. Days passed. Leo and Gabriella worked together. At first it was just business. Gabriella worked hard, ignoring the looks and whispers behind her back. But then something changed. Leo found himself looking at her longer than he should have, waiting for her to smile, finding excuses to just talk to her. One night, when they were working late at the office, he couldn't keep quiet any longer. "Gabriella," he said suddenly, leaning against the desk. She looked up from her laptop. "Yes?" He hesitated. "Just a second. Come with me." Gabriella's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Her heart stopped for a moment. She blinked rapidly, thinking she'd misheard. "Wait, what?" Leo chuckled. "I said, come with me." She caught her breath. Leo Genson, the man she had seen on the covers of magazines, the man every woman in town dreamed of, asking her out. She stared at him. "Are you serious?" Leo smirked. "I don't joke about things like that." Gabriella clenched her hands into fists. "I don't know if I can. This is too much. You're Leo Genson, and I'm just the girl who saved my grandfather when no one else would," he interrupted. "Just the girl who turned down money because she wanted to make it on her own." Gabriella's heart began to pound. "What about Lucy?" she whispered. Leo reached out, lightly brushing her fingers. His touch was warm, sure. "Lucy is the daughter of a friend of my late father," he answered quietly. "Our relationship is not at all what you think." Gabriella looked into his eyes, trying to find even a shadow of insincerity there. But she found nothing, and slowly, hesitantly, she nodded. "Okay. I'll go out with you," she whispered. Leo smiled, and in that moment, everything changed. When Grandpa Genson found out that Leo and Gabriella were dating, he was overjoyed. "This is wonderful news," he exclaimed, clapping his hands. "Finally, my grandson opened his eyes and saw what was right in front of him." He adored Gabriella from the moment she selflessly helped him at the boutique. He knew she was special, but the rest of the world was not so kind. A few days later, gossip sites exploded with headlines. "Leo Genson, billionaire CEO, caught between two women." "Leo Playboy Genson allegedly dating senior manager." His secretary, Lucy Williams, a longtime companion, lost her job. The media painted Leo as a liar, a womanizer, and the rumors spread like wildfire. Lucy seized the moment. She approached every reporter she could find, playing the role of the broken and betrayed woman. "Leo and I were together for years," she lied in the interview. "I never thought he'd replace me with." She paused dramatically. "You know." Everyone caught the implied insult. She was calling Gabriella a nobody, a gold digger, and her plan almost worked. Almost. But Mr. Genson was not a man to play with. The day after Lucy's interview, he called a press conference. Flashbulbs went off in front of the cameras outside the Genson mansion. Reporters crowded in. The whole world was watching live. Mr. Genson cleared his throat. His voice was firm and confident. "I'm here to set the record straight," he said. "My grandson, Leo Genson, is not dating two women." The crowd began to murmur. "And I want the world to know, Lucy was never in a relationship with my grandson." His gaze was cold, his voice unwavering. "She's nothing more than a family friend." Lucy, watching from her penthouse, screamed in rage. But Mr. Genson wasn't finished. "My grandson only has one woman in his life," he continued. "And I want everyone to know, I only have one daughter-in-law." Gabriella stood at the front, nervously clenching her fingers. Her simple yet elegant dress accentuated her natural beauty. "I want my grandson to marry Gabriella," Mr. Henson said loudly. "She's the woman Leo really needs." The crowd erupted. Cameras flashed even brighter. Reporters shouted questions. Gabriella gasped. "Wait, what?" Lucy's jaw dropped. Leo turned to Gabriella. carefully studying her reaction. He hadn't proposed yet, but the thought had crossed his mind more than once. And now, hearing his grandfather say it out loud, he suddenly realized something. He really did want to marry her. Meanwhile, in her penthouse, Lucy gritted her teeth in rage. Gabriella had taken away not only Leo, but everything she had worked so hard to build. There was only one person left who could stop it. Lucy grabbed the phone and quickly dialed. A cold, commanding voice answered sharply on the other end. "Lucy, how are you?" Lucy forced herself to speak calmly. "Lady Mary," she sang in her sweetest voice, "I thought you should know that your son is being pursued by a gold digger." There was a tense pause on the line. Then Leo's powerful aristocratic mother's voice came out flat and sharp. "Explain." Lucy smirked. "Her name is Gabriella. She's a nobody, a social climber. She tricked Mr. Henson into thinking she was innocent, and now he wants Leo to marry her." More silence. But then Lady Mary's voice turned icy. "I'll be on the first plane home." Lucy smiled. Gabriella had no idea what was in store for her. Leo was sitting in his office when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "Mom." He took a deep breath, rubbed his temples, and only then picked up the phone. "Mom, I assume you've heard the news." Her voice was cold. "Yes," he answered calmly, "and I'm not going to change a thing." "Oh, really?" Her tone became even harsher. Leo's patience was wearing thin. Gabriella was not just a random girl. "I love her," he said firmly. Lou was standing behind the door, grinning faintly. Having overheard the conversation, she couldn't help herself. She abruptly threw open the office door and walked in. "Leo," she purred with a smile, "you know what the easiest solution is?" Leo slowly turned to her, his gaze turning icy. Lucy smiled brightly. "Just break up with Gabriella," she suggested, "and the problem will go away." His face darkened. "Lucy," he said slowly, "get out of my office." The girl's smile faltered. "I just wanted to help." Her voice trailed off. Lucy's face flushed with shame, but she had no choice but to turn and leave. As soon as the door closed behind her, Lady Mary's cold voice rang out again. "Leo," came the voice on the phone, "I'll be over tonight. We need to discuss this in person. I expect you to make the right decision." There was a short beep as her mother cut the call. Leo clenched his jaw and lowered the phone. Later that night, Gabriella sat in the garden, looking at the stars. Her thoughts weighed heavily on her. She knew she was falling in love with Leo, but now his mother was back. And from what she had heard, Lady Mary was not one to be easily impressed. Footsteps sounded nearby. Leo came closer, his presence enveloping her with warmth. "You're quiet today," he said softly. Gabriella took a deep breath. "It's just I don't want to come between you and your mother." Leo leaned down and gently lifted her chin, forcing her to look into his eyes. "You're not in the way," he said confidently. "But what if she never accepts me?" Gabriella whispered. Leo didn't even think twice. "Then it's her problem." The girl's heart began to beat faster. There was so much warmth in his eyes. "Gabriella," he said quietly, "I don't care what the world thinks. I don't care what the media says, or Lucy, or even my mother. The only thing that matters is you." Her breath caught in her throat. "You're the only one I want." Tears stung Gabriella's eyes. For the first time in her life, someone had stood up for her. Later that night, Leo stood in his office, arms crossed over his chest, his expression stern. Suddenly the door swung open with force. Lady Mary Hanson entered. She had always been graceful and strong. Her clothes were impeccable, and her posture was regal. But today, even her iron self-control had cracked. "Do you even realize what you're doing?" Leo sighed heavily. He'd been expecting this conversation. "I assume this is about Gabriella." Lady Mary narrowed her eyes. "You're right. This girl is a nobody. She's deceiving you. She sees your wealth, your power, and she's using you to climb the social ladder." Leo's jaw tightened. "Gabriella isn't using me," he said firmly. She didn't even want to accept my gifts. She didn't ask for anything from the moment we met. She works hard." "Works hard?" His mother interrupted him with a sneer. "Her only goal is to get a ring on her finger." Leo's eyes darkened. "Mother, you don't know Gabriella, and if you don't want to give her a chance, that's your problem. But I won't leave her." Lady Mary clenched her fists, anger flashing in her eyes. "I'm your mother, Leo. I know what's best for you." Leo took a deep breath. His voice was calm but firm. "And I'm a grown man, Mom. I make my own decisions." Lady Mary looked at her son, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You'll regret this," she said coldly, then turned and walked out of the office. Leo exhaled and ran a hand through his hair. His mother was wrong about Gabriella, but he had no idea that something far more dangerous was already brewing behind the scenes. Lucy was going crazy. Leo had never officially been hers, but in her mind he was hers alone. And now that he had chosen Gabriella, she had one last step. She had to destroy her rival. Late at night, when the entire mansion was asleep, Lucy quietly crept into the private jewelry room of the Genson family. Under the dim light, the diamonds shimmered with a dazzling shine. She carefully selected one of the most expensive pieces of jewelry, a diamond necklace worth millions, and carefully hid it in a small bag. With a sly grin, Lucy headed straight for Gabriella's bedroom. The next morning, Gabriella was getting ready for work when the doors of the mansion suddenly burst open. The guards rushed in, followed by Lady Mary, Lucy, and several members of the Genson family. "What's going on?" Her heart began to beat faster. One of the guards stepped forward. "Miss Gabriella, you need to come with us." "Why?" she asked, looking around in confusion. Lucy stepped forward, her face carefully feigning pain. I didn't want to believe it," she sobbed, covering her mouth with her hand. But, we found the missing necklace in your room." Gabriella froze. "What?" Lucy's breath caught in her throat. "Oh, I was so shocked when the maids found it." Lucy dramatically placed her hand to her chest. "I thought you were a good person, but now it's all clear. You were just after the Gensons' fortune." Gabriella recoiled in horror, her vision blurred with panic. "No, I didn't take anything," she screamed, but all she heard in response was a murmur from the assembled group. Lady Mary crossed her arms, her gaze icy. "I knew it." There was no doubt in her voice. "A thief." Gabriella felt her heart clench in pain. "That's enough." Everyone froze and turned around. Lady Mary frowned but said nothing. Gabriella's eyes filled with tears. She had done nothing wrong, but it wasn't enough. The whispers of her family, the guards, the staff, they all looked at her as if she were guilty. No matter how much Mr. Henson tried to defend her, the accusation was already hanging over her like a brand. It was too much. With one last look at Leo, she turned away, quickly gathered her things, and walked out of the mansion. Leo stepped forward, trying to stop her, but his grandfather, Mr. Benson, raised his hand, motioning for him not to interfere. Gabriella was gone. The next morning, she sat in her tiny apartment staring at the empty walls. Everything seemed meaningless. She had lost everything yesterday. There was a knock at the door. Gabriella reluctantly stood up and opened it. She recoiled when she saw who was standing at the threshold. Lady Mary, impeccably dressed with perfect posture, her face was unreadable. Gabriella's heart beat faster. "Mrs. Henson?" Lady Mary walked in slowly, looking around with a slight expression of disgust. Her gaze slid over the small space, then turned to Gabriella. Her voice was calm but icy. "I have come to make you an offer." Gabriella swallowed. "What offer?" Without a word, Lady Mary took out her checkbook, clicked her pen, and wrote down the amount. Then, with a smooth motion, she tore the check out and placed it on the table. "This is the price for you to disappear from my son's life." Gabriella's breath caught in her throat. The check said $5 million. "If you leave Leo forever," Lady Mary said smoothly, "it's yours." Gabriella looked at the check, then at Lady Mary. Her hands were shaking, her eyes were stinging with tears. Slowly but firmly she picked up the check and tore it in half. Lady Mary froze in shock. "I love your son," Gabriella whispered, "but I would never take money to leave. I'm not a gold digger." The room went silent. And then Lady Mary's lips lifted slightly. It was not a warm smile, but there was respect in it. "You're stronger than I thought," she murmured. Without another word, she turned and walked out. Gabriella sank to the floor. Tears streamed down her cheeks. It was the end. In the mansion, Leo was silent as he watched Gabriella leave. His chest tightened, but he didn't stop her. Words were useless. She had been wrongly accused, humiliated, and rejected, and the only way to bring her back was to clear her name. While the world thought he was doing nothing, Leo was already working. He reviewed all the security footage from that night. He spoke to the guards, the staff, the maids, and when he found what he was looking for, he knew exactly how to expose Lucy. That day, Leo burst into the Genson mansion. His footsteps echoed, his presence demanding silence. In the main hall, everyone froze. Lucy was already there, dressed in an elegant dress, sipping tea as if nothing had happened. She saw Leo and smiled smugly. "Leo," she purred, standing up. "I know you're hurt, but—" "Shut up, Lucy." His voice was cold as a blade.
The room fell silent.
Lady Mary, Mr. Henson, and the rest of the family looked on curiously. Lucy's grin faltered. Leo's eyes flashed with rage. "You set Gabriella up. You stole the necklace. You planted it in Gabriella's room." Leo said it sharply, as if he had struck her with words. Lucy laughed nervously. "Leo, this is funny," but her voice was shaking. Leo picked up the remote control and pressed play. The big screen in the hall lit up with an image, footage from security cameras. The truth unfolded before everyone's eyes. Lucy sneaks into the jewelry room. Lucy takes the diamond necklace. Lucy enters Gabriella's room. Gasps echoed through the room. Lady Mary's eyes widened in shock. Mr. Genson shook his head in disappointment. Lucy turned pale. "No," she whispered, backing away. "It's a lie. It's a fake." Leo grinned coldly. "It's real." The guard stepped forward. "Miss Lucy, you need to leave the mansion immediately." Lucy panicked. "Leo, please, I did this because I love you." Leo didn't even blink. "Your power of love, Lucy. You would frame an innocent man because of this?" Lucy screamed in despair as the guards dragged her out of the mansion. Her dream of marrying Leo was ruined. Her reputation was destroyed. Her last chance was gone. Lucy Williams had lost everything. After Lucy was thrown out, Lady Mary sat silently for a long time. Then she took a deep breath. "I underestimated Gabriella," she admitted, turning to Mr. Genson. "She never wanted money. She never wanted status. She just wanted Leo." Mr. Genson smiled knowingly. "It's time you realize that." Lady Mary pressed her lips together, and then, for the first time, she nodded. "I think," she said quietly, "I'd like to talk to her again." Gabriella sat in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling. She had given up millions to stay with Leo, but she had already lost him, or so she thought. A knock on the door made her sit up abruptly. She opened it and froze. A personal driver in an elegant suit stood before her. "Miss Gabriella," he bowed politely, "Mr. Leo Genson requests your presence in a private sitting room." Gabriella's heart sank. Leo wanted to see her. She hesitated. Should she go? And then she remembered how he had always protected her, how he had always been on her side. She took a deep breath. She nodded. "Take me to him." The private sitting room was unlike anything she had ever seen before. Had Gabriella ever seen anything more beautiful? The soft golden glow of the candles, a fancy dinner, a breathtaking view of the city at night, stretching to the horizon. And in the center of it all, him, Leo Genson. Gabriella paused at the entrance, her heart pounding. Leo looked at her with that same soft smile, one she had never seen before. "Gabriella," he said softly, coming closer, "I've been waiting for you." Gabriella swallowed. "Leo, But she didn't get to finish, because Leo did something that stopped her heart completely. He dropped to one knee. Gabriella's eyes filled with tears. She pressed her hand to her mouth, not believing her eyes. Leo took out a small box and opened it, a diamond ring. "I don't care what the world says." His voice was full of emotion. "I don't care about false rumors. You're the only one I care about." Gabriella's heart was beating so hard, it felt like it could be heard. "You're the strongest, kindest person I've ever met," Leo continued, taking a deep breath. "You didn't just change my grandfather's life, you changed mine." Tears streamed down Gabriella's cheeks. "Gabriella." Leo looked at her with warmth. "Will you marry me?" She took a shaky breath, and then with a trembling smile whispered, "Yes." Leo's eyes lit up with joy. He carefully placed the ring on her finger, and then, under the glow of the city lights, he pulled her close and kissed her, as if she was his whole world. When the news of their engagement spread around the city, it struck like lightning. Billionaire Leo Genson is engaged to a former boutique assistant. A modern Cinderella fairy tale that has become reality. But for Gabriella, this was more than just a story. This was her life. She lost everything, but she found something more. She found love. Gabriella is a simple girl who has captured the heart of the richest CEO in the country. Who is she? What do we know about the woman Leo Genson chose? This morning, social media exploded. Some applauded Gabriella, praising her kindness and modesty. Others condemned her, not believing in this modern fairy tale. But no one was more shocked and angry than Gloria. She was in the middle of touching up her makeup in a boutique when she saw the headline flash on her phone. Her fingers clenched. "Gabriella is engaged to Leo Genson. The same Gabriella she humiliated. The same Gabriella she fired." Gloria's hand trembled. The lipstick fell from her fingers, leaving a scarlet mark on the marble floor. "No," she whispered, her lips dry. "It's impossible. How? How did this happen?" How did the girl she looked down on, the girl she bullied, won it all in the end? Gloria tried to collect her thoughts, but at that moment, the doors of the boutique swung open.
The room fell silent.
People froze in horror, watching as Leo and Gabriella walked inside. He was holding her hand. Tall, confident, with an icy expression on his face. The staff held their breath. Gloria felt her throat go dry. Gabriella looked elegant, her wedding ring sparkling in the light. The same girl Gloria had once considered a nobody. Now she was the future Mrs. Genson. Gloria forced herself to smile. "Mr. Genson! Miss Gabriella!" Her voice was too sweet, too strained. "What a unexpected surprise!" Leo narrowed his eyes coldly. "I came here for one reason, Gloria." His voice was so sharp it could cut the air. Gloria swallowed. "Oh, of course, sir." Leo crossed his arms. "You insulted my grandfather." Gloria froze. "You humiliated people just for their appearance." She clenched her fists. "You mocked an employee who had done nothing wrong." The silence became unbearable. Gloria felt the ground slipping out from under her feet. She had just faced the consequences of her actions. And this time, there was no escape. Sue's face went pale. Leo's voice turned icy. "I would have fired you a long time ago." Sue's heart thudded. "But I wanted to tell you this in person." The air in the boutique thickened. "You're fired." His words were like a death sentence. "And let this be a lesson to everyone." The voices died down. "Discrimination and bullying will never be tolerated in my company." Ours filled the store. Sue staggered. She had lost everything. She watched Gabriella and Leo walk away, leaving her behind. Suddenly, Mr. Genson's words came back to her. "Kindness is more valuable than expensive clothes." Now Sue understood. She had gotten herself into this mess. There was no one to blame but herself. But as Gabriella and Leo planned their wedding, new clouds were gathering over them. Lucy was furious. She had lost everything, humiliated, thrown to the curb. But she had one last weapon, Lux Group. Lucy still had access to the company's confidential data. She logged in. A cold fire of revenge burned in her eyes. She had hacked financial reports. She had leaked classified contracts, investment deals, internal transactions to the press. "If I can't have Leo," she whispered, smiling evilly, "I will destroy him." The next morning, the world exploded. Crisis at Lux Group. A financial data leak has brought Leo Genson's empire to the brink of collapse. Lucy watched the chaos, laughed, celebrated. She had won. But her triumph did not last long. A loud knock on the door made her heart stop. She turned around slowly. A shadow fell on the doorway. With trembling hands, Lucy turned the handle and froze. Her face turned pale. Leo. He stood before her. His eyes were dark, cold. And Lucy understood. This is the end. Lady Mary paused, her hands folded neatly in her lap. You've proven to me that your feelings for Leo are real. Gabriella squeezed her fingers. I've never wanted anything but him. Lady Mary nodded slightly. I can see that. She took a deep breath, her voice warm for the first time. Welcome to the family. Gabriella's eyes widened. Her heart sank at the unexpected confession. You, her voice shook. I approve of your marriage to Leo. Gabriella blinked, not believing her ears. Lady Mary stood up. Take care of my son. She looked at Gabriella with respect. And he will take care of you. Tears filled Gabriella's eyes, but they were tears of happiness. She never thought this day would come. Thank you, Lady Mary. The woman smiled slightly and left. Gabriella sat there, realizing that she now had not only love, but also a family, and for the first time in a long time, she felt at home. When Gabriella stepped onto the red carpet, everyone froze. Cameras flashed, guests whispered in admiration. Leo waited at the altar, his heart beating faster with every step she took. He had never seen her so beautiful, radiant, graceful, like a true queen. Lady Mary sat in the front row watching the bride. There was no doubt on her face, only respect and perhaps pride. When Gabriella reached Leo, he extended his hand to her, his eyes filled with love. You are magnificent, he whispered. She smiled through tears of happiness. The ceremony was elegant and touching. When the priest said, I now pronounce you husband and wife, Leo gently took Gabriella's face in his hands and kissed her, as if there was nothing in the world except the two of them. The crowd burst into applause. The guests rejoiced. This day will go down in history as the wedding of the century. But for Gabriella and Leo, this was not just a holiday. This was the beginning of their happy eternity. Gabriella gasped as she looked at the shining beauty Leo held before her. She knew it was more than just jewelry. It was a symbol of his love, his promise, his admiration for her. You deserve the best, Gabriella, Leo whispered, clasping the necklace around her neck. The guests applauded again, showering the couple with admiring glances. But to Gabriella, neither gold nor diamonds mattered. The only thing that truly filled her heart with joy was the love that burned in Leo's eyes. As their first dance began, he pulled her close, their hearts beating in unison. You changed my life, Gabriella, he said, looking into her eyes. Now let's build our eternity together. She smiled, letting the happiness wash over her. This night, this moment, this man. This was her real fairy tale, only now she knew this is not the end. This is only the beginning of their great love. Jewel fit for a queen. Gabriella held her breath. Leo, this is too much, she whispered. But Leo only smiled softly and carefully placed the necklace around her neck. His fingers barely slid over her skin as he fastened the clasp. Then he looked into her eyes, and his voice, filled with sincere emotion, sounded deep and confident. You are the only woman I will ever love. His words penetrated the very soul. And my love for you is as deep as the ocean. Gabriella's heart began to beat faster. A single tear slid down her cheek, but Leo gently brushed it away with his fingertips. You changed my life, he continued. You gave me something that money could never give me, a reason to love. Gabriella hugged him, whispering, I love you too, and then Leo kissed her. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a promise, a declaration, a new beginning. The entire room erupted in applause. Fireworks burst into fiery patterns outside the windows, as if the whole world was celebrating their love. Among the crowd, Gabriella's former colleagues, senior employees, those who had once looked down on her, now applauded her in admiration. The nobody they had mocked was now the most powerful woman in high society. Standing at the edge of the ballroom, watching it all, was Mr. Genson. He smiled, feeling proud and deeply satisfied. Gabriella had proven her worth, and now she would be loved forever. With the music playing, the chandeliers shining, Gabriella and Leo kissed again. Mr. Genson chuckled softly. "Good things happen to good people," he whispered. And Gabriella Genson's love story will become legendary.